Hello, welcome to my channel, In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne, and today I am doing my yearly check-in. Provided I am not accosted by bees or other insects or creatures, I'm going to film this on my deck. We'll see what happens. So, I have been enjoying watching all the videos of the mid-year freakout tag that have been going around in the month of June, and I kind of want to do something similar. I have taken some of the questions from that tag, was inspired by some of those questions, but I also wanted to talk more like statistics and more specific to my goals for the year. So this is not exactly the same. It's not the tag, but it is a mid-year check-in to see how I'm doing with my goals for the year, my reading goals and plans, and a look at the rest of the year, what I hope to accomplish in the rest of the year. So let's get started. My overall reading goal for the year was to read 100 books, which is roughly 2 books a week. And so far I have read 63. Now my Goodreads doesn't reflect that, and neither does Storygraph. I think 1 or 2 of the books I read weren't actually on Storygraph, and I didn't take the time to put them on. And I'm not sure, there's always a discrepancy for me, but my reading journal is the most accurate record. So that's what I'm going by. And that shows 63, provided my math was correct, because there's that. But usually I find I can count pretty well. So I counted 63. Where is that page? Okay. So this is my book tracker, and you can see I drew 100 book outlines on this page, or this spread, and I'm coloring them in as I go, a different color each month. So now I'm filming this a little bit before the end of June, and so some of the last 3 I am determined to finish by Sunday, which is the last day in June, but we'll see if I actually accomplish that or not. That's the goal, but I'm counting them. I mean, I'm gonna finish them, if not June 30th, then July 1st or 2nd, so we're gonna count them for June. But anyway, so far that's 63 books, so doing well with that goal. Kind of halfway through the year, I gave myself a new goal, which was that I wanted to read 50% of my books from my bookshelf, or from my actual Kindle library of owned digital books. So in other words, not library books, not Kindle Unlimited, not Amazon Prime books, but books that I personally own, have been gifted to me, or I have purchased. So I counted that up to see which of the books that I've read so far this year were my own copies. Now, for the purposes of this statistic, I only counted books that I already had, not books that I purchased specifically for a reading event that I was doing. So even though I actually owned those, I didn't count them because I went out and bought them for a reading challenge or a readathon, and I didn't already have them on my shelf. So this only counts for books that I already owned or someone gave to me that I read. So of the books that I read, 63, 28 of them were my own copies, which is pretty good. It's not quite half. It's a little bit shy of half, but it was better than I expected, actually. So I'm a little bit proud of myself for that. So yay me. And I'm hoping to bring up that percentage a little bit the rest of the year as I'm more consciously working towards that goal. June was really good for me in that respect. A lot of what I read in June was my own physical copies of books. So that was positive development in that direction. Now, the best books that I read, the 5-star books that I read, I keep track of those on a page in my journal. And I've debated back and forth within myself if I should track only new reads as 5-star or rereads, but I decided just to track all of them. These are the 5-star books that I have read. So first was The Price of Privilege trilogy by Jessica Dada, which was a reread in January. And then Fierce Wars and Faithful Loves, which is book 1 of The Fairy Queen by Edmund Spencer, which was honestly a little more of a head 5 than a heart 5. Like, I really objectively enjoyed it, but it wasn't like you know, a heart enjoyment sort of book. And then Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland, which I 100% loved. Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. I'll be talking more about that one in a minute. The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon by Beth Brower was also the first 2 volumes I read anyway, were 5-star for me. Hospital Sketches by Louisa May Alcott was a surprise little 5-star, and so was 0 to 100, The Gospel to the Saint by Jim Van Gelderen. I was not expecting to enjoy that book as much as I did. So those were my 5-star reads this year. Now you'll notice they're not very many. That does not mean I have not had a lot of good reading this year. I'm just very stingy with 5 stars. It takes a lot for me to give a book 5 stars. I basically have to have 0 complaints about it, or it has to be a book that I think I will reread or I want to keep for myself. Yeah, so it has to fit one or more of those criteria. A lot of the books that I enjoy reading fall into the 4.5-star category, 4 or 4.5 stars. So I'm going to go through and also mention all of the books I've read this year that have gotten 4 or 4.5 stars from me, and there are a lot of them. The majority of the books I've read have gotten good ratings from me. So Last Christmas in Paris by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb was one of them. Really enjoyed that. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, 4.5 stars. Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile was 4.5 stars for me. The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle for me was 4 stars. I'm just realizing that the cover that I put in my journal of that one, I don't know if you can see, is like, it's like a mirror image. It's reversed. I don't know how that happened. And let's see, Hope Between the Pages by Pepper Basham was 4 stars. Veiled in Smoke by Jocelyn Green was 4 stars. Fool by Ashrita Chuchu was also 4 stars. That was in nonfiction. The Seamstress of Acadie by Laura France was 4 stars. And let's see, that was all in January. See, a lot of 4.5 stars. Then in February, The Divine Proverb of Streusel by Sarah Brunsfold was 4.5 stars. The Vicar of Wakefield was 4 stars. The Lily of Ludgate Hill by Mimi Matthews was 4.5 stars. Really loved that one. The Summer Book by Tove Jansson was 4 stars. That was a very pleasant read. That would be a great one to read in the summer, by the way. And then Baron and Luthien by J.R.R. Tolkien was 4.5 stars. A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting by Sophie Irwin was 4 stars. That was a funny, cute story. Fairest of Heart by Karen Whitmire, 4 stars. Also a fun little read. And then on to March. Dear Mrs. Bird by A.J. Pierce, which I read with Miriam, and we both loved that one. Really enjoyed it. Yevgeny Onegin by Alexander Pushkin was 4.5 stars for me. Buddy read that with Dia and Courtney, and we all really enjoyed it as well. The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys, great book. Really love that. April. Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I read an illustrated children's book version of that. Was very good. I read a short story by Louisa May Alcott. Oh goodness. Behind the Mask, I think is what it was called. That was a fun read. And then Louisa May Alcott's Life, Letters, and Journal I also enjoyed. That was 4 stars. And The Inheritance I gave 4 stars. It was a bit of a generous 4 stars, to be honest. But that was kind of taking into consideration Louisa May Alcott's age when she wrote it and other things like that. Anne of Windy Poplars was 4 stars for me. And then in May, Where the Blue Sky Begins, 4.5 stars. That was by Katie Pouner. The Watsons by Jane Austen, and then finished by John something or other, and I gave that 4 stars. A Million Little Choices by Tamara Alexander was 4 stars, and Regency Buck by Georgette Hare was 4.5 stars. Love Georgette Hare. The Blue Castle by Ella Montgomery was also 4.5 stars. Really good. Liked that one a lot. The Words We Lost by Nicole Deese was 4 stars. And The Recorder by Kathy McCrum, I gave 4.5 stars. We're in June now. And Becoming Free Indeed by Ginger Duggar-Wollo, I gave 4 stars. And The Vanishing at Castle Moreau by Janie Jo Wright, which I already read with Lindsay, was also 4 stars. Or did I get that 4.5? 4.5. 4 stars. And Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, I gave 4.5 stars. Now, I want to say, actually, I forgot to mention because I didn't write it down on my list yet. I am predicting 2 more 5-star reads here. Anne's House of Dreams by Ella Montgomery I am in the process of wrapping that one up and really enjoying it. And I will talk more about it when I actually finish it, but I think that's going to be 5 stars. And then Paradise Lost by John Milton. I have 3 more of the books left to read, and I'm pretty much convinced it's going to be 5 stars. So those will be some 5-star reads. I also track my DNFs here on this page, and I don't have many 5 stars. I also don't have many DNFs. It takes a lot for me to DNF a book. Less and less as time goes on, to be honest, but yeah. So the books that I have DNF'd this year were Master and Commander by Patrick O'Brien. There was just too much content I wasn't interested in. In Paris with You by Clementine Beauvais. I feel like it was supposed to be like a poetic retelling. Well, I mean, it was a poem originally, Yevgeny Onegin by Alexander Pushkin. And it was supposed to be a modern retelling set in Paris. I did, like, from the very beginning, I did not get very far, but from the very beginning, the characters were totally, completely unlike the original characters in Yevgeny Onegin by Alexander Pushkin, and I just wasn't there for that. It was a totally different story she was telling, and I didn't want to read it. And then we have Godmersham Park by Gil Hornby, which I had a big long discussion on a video about why I quit that one. Seeking Mansfield by Kate Watson was just too YA for me. And then Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I just couldn't. So those are the ones that I DNF'd. Thankfully not too many. So overall, I'm very pleased that I've had maybe not like super top tier reading, like everything was 5 stars and amazing, etc., but solid, great reading this year, and I'm pretty happy about that. So far, no freaking out, no super disappointing anything. I'm pleased with the progress this year. So let's talk a little more specifically about the books I read and how I felt about them. I think one of the questions from the freak out tag was like a book that surprised you. And I think that's a really good question. So there were a few books that surprised me, and surprised me in a good way by being better than I expected. And the first was Mansfield Park, which I had read before. So I guess I thought I knew what to expect from it. And I was expecting not to love it. And then I read it, and it was a total 5-star read for me. Absolutely loved Mansfield Park. And then Emma M. Lyon, I knew a lot of people had raved about it, but I was just expecting it to be kind of like a light, fun read, and it is for sure. But it was more than that for me. It was just so fresh and interesting, and I just loved the storytelling and the format. It was so creative, but it was well done. It wasn't like the creativity and the format of it didn't distract from the story. It drew you into the story. So I was really impressed by the creativity of the author and the fresh approach to the storytelling, and just really enjoyed that. So that surprised me. And then, as I mentioned, Anne's House of Dreams. I've read the whole Anne series before, and I remember reading House of Dreams before and kind of liking it, but not loving it. I felt it was a little boring. And the Captain Jin character, you know, his storytelling and everything, I found kind of slow. I didn't love it, but I am loving it this time. I think maybe it takes a little bit more maturity in life. I probably read it when I was a teenager, and a little more life experience to really appreciate Anne as she is growing older. She's a young married woman, and she has a true tragedy for the first time in her life. And oh my goodness, it just, that whole chapter brought me to tears, and her grieving and healing from that, just really well done. It's not like sodden and dripping with emotion, but Ella Montgomery has a light touch, but it's just really well done. And I feel like we get more Anne and we get more Gilbert in this story than we do in some of the other books, which tend to focus a lot on the ancillary characters. Now, there's definitely some of that, but at least those characters are fun. So anyway, I don't want to talk anymore about that. I'll talk more about it when I actually finish it. But Anne's House of Dreams has surprised me by how much I have loved it on this reread. Hospital Sketches by Louisa May Alcott surprised me with how funny and relatable and joyful of a read it was. I was expecting it to be a little bit dull and dry maybe, and informative, but not interesting. And instead, I found it very interesting. And then The Vanishing at Castle Moreau, I was surprised also by how much I like that. I mean, I like Jamie Jo Wright's books, but they're not usually books that I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm loving this so much necessarily. And this one, there were parts in the process of reading it that I didn't love it so much. And there were things about it that are why I didn't give it a full 5 stars. But I really, really loved how she how she concluded the story. And it was just really beautifully done, and it made it rise above some of her other books, in my opinion. And I was surprised by how much I loved that. And I have been surprised at how much I love Paradise Lost. I thought for me, Paradise Lost would be a little bit like the Fairy Queen that I read earlier this year, in that I would be able to appreciate it academically, like, you know, mentally, and be able to see it as something beautiful, and admire it. I did not expect to be enjoying it as much as I am. And I really have been loving Paradise Lost. So that surprised me in a good way. I have had some disappointments this year. Now, in the disappointments category, I put books that I expected to be good, but I didn't actually enjoy. And these are also books that I finished. So they're not DNFs, but they're books that disappointed me, and I gave 3 stars or fewer to them. And I was expecting them to be more like 4 or 5 star reads, but they weren't for me. And the first was Miss Newberry's List. And I can't remember what I gave that one. Let's see. 2.5 stars. So many people had loved it, but I couldn't relate to the main character at all. I don't know, it's kind of a madcap story, and it was just too much for me. I just couldn't. So I was disappointed by that one personally. And then The Letter Tree by Rachel Fordham, I gave 3 stars. And I was expecting that to be more of a 4 or 5 star read, because I know so many people loved it. Taylor and I read it together, and we both walked away with the same feeling, that we were a little bit disappointed by that one. And then Children of the Stars by Mario Escobar, which was a group read organized by Alma in June. And I was expecting to love it, because I had previously read a book by Mario Escobar that I really loved and enjoyed. And I was expecting to love it, and I did not. And I think I also gave that one 2.5 stars. Let me double check. Yeah, 2.5 stars. Everything from the premise to the storytelling to, in a lesser way, there was a little bit of content that was more like, why? But overall, just walked away from that thinking, okay, I was disappointed. And then Midnight Library. Now, I ended up giving it a decent rating, 3.5 stars, because there were things about it that I enjoyed, but it wasn't a 5-star read for me. And I know, like, I bought it at a fundraising yard sale, thrift market, or yard sale, flea market sort of thing. And when I bought it, the lady who was ringing me up, she was like, oh my goodness, you're gonna love this book so much. And so many other people had really loved it. I thought it would be more of a 5-star read, but it wasn't. It was fine, but it was a 3.5 star for me. And then The Words We Lost by Nicole Deese. I had previously read a book by her that I loved absolutely and gave 5 stars. This one, it wasn't on that love it level for me. So not that I hated it, I think I still gave it 4 stars, and I think it was good. It just wasn't at the same level for me, so I was a little bit disappointed by that. I also want to mention the books that either met or exceeded my expectations. So books that didn't surprise me by being good, because I expected them to be good, but also books that did not let me down by being less than I expected them to be. So these are books that I went into thinking this is going to be 4 or 5 stars, and it was, and that made me very happy. So these are books that met my expectations or exceeded them. And The Last Christmas in Paris by Hazel Gaynor was one of them. She is an author I've been wanting to try for a while. So many people loved this book, and so I was really hoping to love it myself, and I did. It delivered. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I have also heard many people rave about her books, and I was hoping that I would also enjoy it, and I did. I really liked that one. The Divine Proverb of Streusel by Sarah Brunsfeld. I had loved her book, The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp, so much. I was hoping that her second book would deliver, and it did. It was maybe not quite 100% at the same level as Mrs. Kipp, but it was still very good and excellent. Second book by her. Lily of Ludgate Hill by Mimi Matthews. I have been enjoying her most recent series, with some caveats for some aspects of some of the books. So it hasn't been necessarily my 100% favorite of hers. But from everything that I had read and heard about Lily of Ludgate Hill, I was fully expecting to enjoy it thoroughly, and I did. And Miriam Elizabeth Reads, she and I were buddy reading it, and we both agreed. Excellent book. One of our favorites by Mimi Matthews. And then Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland. I had heard so many people in my real life and on BookTube and everything just talking about how great that book was. So it was. I agree. Dear Mrs. Bird, again, I read it with Miriam, and again, we both had heard good things, and we had big expectations of it, and we both enjoyed it very much. Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys. Now, that book in particular, I didn't have super high expectations of because it's not one that a lot of people talk about when they talk about Ruta Sepetys. But Ruta Sepetys as an author was one that I had heard praised very highly by many people, people that I love and respect and agree with their reading choices many times and agree with their reading perspective. So I was expecting to really love Ruta Sepetys, and I did. So that was, I was happy for that, and I'm looking forward to reading more by her. Where the Blue Sky Begins by Katie Powner. Katie Powner was on my list of authors I wanted to try, and I was pleasantly pleased by my first book by her. The Blue Castle by Lucy Maud Montgomery. So many people say it's one of their favorite Lucy Maud Montgomery books, and it's really good and comparable to the Anne series or better than the Anne series. And I wouldn't put it above Anne because love me some Anne of Green Gables, but I definitely enjoyed The Blue Castle very much. Read that as a buddy read with Morgan and Courtney, and Courtney had read it several times already. Morgan and I, this was, well, it ended up being a reread for me. I had forgotten that I had read it a very long time ago. And then Morgan, it was the first time read for her. Anyways, we all really enjoyed it. The Recorder by Kathy McCrum was kind of a buzzy book in the past year or so here on BookTube, and I was expecting to enjoy it based on what everybody said, and I did. It delivered for me. And Their Eyes Were Watching God is another one. It's a classic. So many people say it's really good, but some of those can be hit or miss. Like, you might read it and be like, okay, what does everybody see in this book that's so amazing? There were things about it that I didn't love, and things about it that I would say I didn't agree with necessarily, but it was just really well written, and it kept me reading, and I enjoyed the story. So that one delivered for me as well. That's kind of like a review of my reaction to the books that I have read so far this year. Let's talk a little bit more about more specific goals that I had. So in my reading journal for this year, well, this isn't necessarily just for this year. This is kind of ongoing. I have authors that I want to read to zero, classic authors I want to read to zero. I have authors backlists that I want to read, and then I have a couple different lists of authors that I want to try. So I'm going to go through those right now and see what progress I've made, if any, on those. As far as all the Austen I want to read goes, I had already had a good, and this is actually rereading. All of this is rereading, by the way. I had everything filled out but Mansfield Park prior to this year. Mansfield Park, Lady Susan, Sanditon, the Watts, and the Watsons. So I read Mansfield Park earlier this year, and for Jane Austen July, I'm going to read Sanditon and possibly Lady Susan as well. So then that whole list will be completely done. And I don't think that anyone is surprised that Austen is the first author that I will read to zero. I also have lists for Dickens and Bronte. I've read some of Dickens and I've read most of Bronte, but I've not added to either of these lists so far this year. And that's okay. This is an ongoing thing. It doesn't have to be done this year. All the Lucy Maud Montgomery I want to read. I am slowly rereading the Anne series, but I've already read them. And I read The Blue Castle. And I would like to read some more by her, but at least I added one to that list. Then I have Elizabeth Gaskell, and I have not added anything to that. Oh, that's, yeah, not this year. Shakespeare, again, haven't added anything to that one. So I guess I need to get cracking on my classic reading to zero. I think I have one more in here. Yes. All the Louisa May Alcott. And with Alcott April, I added quite a bit to this list. So I was able, and actually that's when I made this list. So I have not many of her full-length novels that I need to read still. Just a lot of either her short story collections or there's children's short stories, and then there's the short stories she published for adults that are in a very different vein from her full-length novels that I've not read. So I want to read all of those. And then author backlists that I want to try. I've not made a great deal of progress on any of them. So one that I had was Kate Morton. Haven't read anything by her this year. Although Chantal was just talking about reading Homecoming the other day in a video and was making me interested in reading that one. I did read Lily of Ludgate Hill by Mimi Matthews. But there are 4 more books by her I haven't read yet. I've not read anything by Francine Rivers this year. And by Nicole Deese, I read 1. Still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 by her that I haven't read yet. I've only read 2 of her books. And she keeps coming out with them, so. And by Jamie Jo Wright, I read The Vanishing at Castle Moreau. But I still have 6 more, and then she keeps writing them, so I'm just gonna, you know, like, be behind, but I'm gonna try and catch up some of those. By Laura France, I started A Moonbow Night, but I haven't finished it yet, so that will be the next one to add on that one. So those are the author backlists that I want to read. As far as authors that I want to try, I had some goals of new authors for me that I wanted to try. On Christian authors, I've read one, Katie Powner. So, and that was very enjoyable. But I also want to read by Amanda Cox, Lynn Austin. I've realized since I made this list, I actually have read books by Lynn Austin, so maybe I could cross that off too, but I haven't in a long time, and I want to read another one. Tia Cooper and Lori Benton. And then other authors that I want to try are Neil Gaiman and Cormac McCarthy, Kate Quinn, Hazel Gaynor, and George Saunders. And Hazel Gaynor, I read a book by her, so I crossed that one off. So 20% of the way through both of those lists, which isn't great, but that's fine. Again, doesn't have to be done all this year. Classic authors I want to try: Anthony Trollope, J.R.R. Tolkien, Ray Bradbury, Kurt Vonnegut, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I read a book by Tolkien and a book by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So I've got 2 knocked off that list, so that's good. Okay, then I made a list for 2023 book releases that I did not get to, that I wanted to, and I have read 3 of them. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the list. I've read 3, so that's not quite half. That's not too bad for being halfway through the year. I still need to read Within These Walls of Sorrow by Amanda Barrett, To Win a Prince by Tony Shiloh, which I have a copy of. The Rose and the Thistle by Laura France, and The Weight of Air by Kimberly Duffy. And then the 2024 releases that I want to read, I've read 3 of them so far. I have 5 written out here, so that's more than half, so that's good. I'm doing better keeping up with new releases this year than last year. The Seamstress of Acadie, The Divine Proverb of Streusel, and The Lily of Ludgate Hill I have read. I have a copy of Born of Gilded Mountains, which is next on my list that I plan to read. And For Lifetime by Gabrielle Meyer, I hope to read in July. So I'm doing well with that list. There are a couple more that are going to be added to that as the year goes on. I will talk about that in a minute. As for other goals, I have a few other lists that I wanted to be working through. This was a goal for the year, and I'm stinking at it. Stinking. So this is books from my shelves. And these are books that I've had on my shelf. I just haven't read them yet, and I need to. And I don't want to get rid of them until I have read them and given them a solid chance. I've read 2 of them so far, Midnight Library and Children of the Stars. And then I crossed out Master and Commander because I tried it and I didn't finish it. And then Ordinary Grace is on here twice. So out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, not including the repeat of Ordinary Grace, out of 9 books, we can say that 3 of them I have neither read or tried to read, and that's 30%. So that's not horrible, but we're 50% of the way through the year. So other ones on my list that I need to focus on this year are the rest of the year are Gilead, Hillbilly, which I started but didn't finish, Hillbilly Elegy, Ordinary Grace, Rules of Civility, Book Thief, and The Keepers of Lost Things. So I need to get to those before the year is over. I also made a list, and this is for this year, of books that I want to reread, or at least I want to make good progress on it this year. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 books on this list, and so far I've read 3, but I'm very close to finishing 2 of them, so that would be 5, and that is almost halfway through. Just about halfway through, so that's really good. I'm finishing up Les Miserables, and I'm finishing up Anne's House of Dreams, so I'll be able to cross those off. I still need to read Age of Innocence and Ethan Frome, both by Edith Wharton. Mixed Signals, which I read a long time ago and really loved, so I just want to read it again. That's by Liz Curtis Higgs. Any book by Linda Nichols or Brandy Lynn Collins, which were books that I read, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago and really enjoyed. So I want to reread them again and see if I still would enjoy them. And then The Scarlet Pimpernel, which keeps showing up on my TBR, and I keep not reading it, but I will. I totally will. Those are all of the goals that I had. There are several reading challenges that I'm doing throughout the year. The first is Chantel's Read Your Bookshelf Challenge, and I'm doing really well with that, staying on top of that. Some of the months I've even managed to read both of the prompts. Now, one thing I will say is that a couple of times I have forgotten that the goal is to read from your bookshelf. So I'm going to try and do better about that. As I said, the rest of this year, one of my goals is to read 50% of my books from my shelf. So I'm going to do better about that the rest of this year, because the whole goal is to read books that you already own. A couple of these that I've read, I didn't actually already own, so I need to focus more on that. Then the Tea and Ink Society Classics Reading Challenge that I like to do every year, I have kept on top of that up through June. So July is to read utopian or dystopian. So I'm hoping to get that. There's so much going on in July on BookTube that I really want to participate in. So that's when I may fall off the wagon in that one, but I want to read Fahrenheit 451. And the What the Dickens Facebook book club, they choose a different classic every month. And I kind of dip in and out of that as depending on the book and my interest level and what else I have going on. Up through this point in the year, I have read half of the ones that they have read. Anne of Green Gables, I read Anne's House of Dreams instead because that's where I was in that series, in my reread of that series. And I opted out of Peter Pan and the Old Man and the Sea. In July, they're reading Around the World in 80 Days. I don't know. I may or may not get to that. Again, like I said, a lot going on in July. And in August, they're reading Emma by Jane Austen. I may read an Emma adaptation because I've recently reread Emma and I think I'm going to have too much on my plate to reread Emma again. Those are the ongoing challenges that I have been doing throughout this year, and doing pretty well with them overall, I think. The next question is, for me, that I wanted to talk about on this video is books that I need to finish this year. And they're really just two that I've started already that I need to finish. And that is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo and On the Dead Shall Rise by Steve Oney, which is nonfiction. And definitely Les Miserables I'm really close to finishing. I just have one more volume left and a couple chapters from the previous volume. So I'm totally getting there. Maybe even by the time this video goes live, I will have finished that. We'll see. And The Dead Shall Rise, I'm hoping to finish it through the summer and to count that for a big book summer and get that knocked off my list. And then I will have finished what I started with those books. And then I have a stack of library books that I need to read, and I'm probably not going to read them before I need to return them to the library, but they are on my list. They're mostly new releases from 2023 and 2024 by Christian authors like Jamie Jo Wright, her most recent one, Catherine Ray, and I'm drawing a blank on the other ones, but there are a couple of library books that I would like to get to. I just haven't yet. And then there are some new releases that I am looking forward to later in the year, besides Born of Gilded Mountains, which I'm hoping to read soon and will have already started by the time this video begins. I also want to read For a Lifetime by Gabrielle Meyer and be prepared for her new release that will be coming up, I think, later this year. She has another one in the series. So I need to read For a Lifetime, so I'll be ready for that one. Mimi Matthews has another book in her series, Bells of London, I think it is, The Muse of Maiden Lane, and that's coming up this fall. So I'm looking forward to reading that. That's definitely on my radar. As is the last book, or the volume 8 in the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. I kind of want to read all of the published novels, but I have like 5 more before that one is released. And I'm not sure if there's a release date yet for that one. I don't know. I haven't looked it up. But at any rate, that's on my radar as well as something that I would like to read, that I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the year. But all in all, doing pretty well on my overall goals. Some of the more specific goals I have not quite hit the mark, not even come close. But overall, I'm satisfied with my reading progress this year. There's no freak out here. Just enjoying this year of reading. I think any goals that I might focus on for the rest of the year, in addition to what I've already got going here, one is, like I said, to read more from my shelf. 50% of the books I want to read from my bookshelf, and just create a library that's more carefully curated of books that I actually love and read or want to read. But then secondly, I also want to be a little more intentional, which I have tried to be, but sometimes more or less successful. I want to really be sure that the books I'm reading are the books that I really want to read. And I want to be more intentional about asking myself, because I'm so often looking around saying, oh, I want to read that, oh, I want to read that, oh, I want to read that. And so I want to take a minute and think, okay, is the book that I'm reading one that I really want to read? Is it one that I have been saying, oh, I really want to read that? Or is it just something I picked up because it happened to fit a prompt, or because someone else is reading it, and I just, you know, for whatever reason, decided to read it too. I don't know. What are the different reasons that we pick up books for one reason or another? I just want to be a little more selective and think, is this book in the Marie Kondo phraseology does it spark joy? Like, is this book one that I'm really wanting to read? When I'm done with it, will I be able to say, okay, I'm glad I read that book, even if I didn't like it? It was one that I wanted to try, that I was very interested in, that I've been wanting to read, and it's not one that just I got distracted by for whatever reason. So I want to be more intentional about actually reading the books that I have been wanting to read, and authors that I really want to read, and not just reading to fill a prompt or to, I don't know, to check another box somewhere. Like, are these books I actually want to read? So those are my goals for the rest of the year. And yeah, so it's been a great reading year. Let me know in the comments how your reading year has gone. How would you rate your experience of reading so far this year? First of all, in terms of your enjoyment of it, and secondly, in your terms of goal accomplishment. If you had any goals, how are you doing with those? And what are your goals for the rest of the year? And let's keep the conversation going in the comments, and I will talk to you later. Bye.